Before we get into this breakdown, here's what this video is really about. This isn't just an explanation of why the Snake Oil Salesman survives Hank's device in Episode 5, The Wrangler. This is a breakdown of how Fallout Season 2 quietly redefines control, consent, and manipulation, and how one seemingly silly cameo becomes the trigger for the season's most devastating betrayal.
Every moment you've cherished will be completely and utterly removed from your memory.
By the end of this video, you'll understand why Hank is more dangerous than any raider or mutant in the Wasteland, why the Ghoul's choice was inevitable, and why Lucy was already losing the moment Hank decided to speak instead of kill. Now let's talk about what the Wrangler is actually doing. At first glance, Episode 5 feels almost deceptive in tone. It's lighter, it's packed with callbacks. Familiar faces resurface, including Ma, June, and Barv, reinforcing the idea that Norm is unknowingly retracing Lucy's steps through a world that keeps repeating its own mistakes. The episode leans into nostalgia, humor, and absurdity, the classic Fallout cocktail. And that's intentional, because the Wrangler is hiding one of the most disturbing ideas of Season 2 right under that surface. The return of the Snake Oil Salesman seems like another joke at first. He's the same smooth-talking Wastelander who sold Thaddeus the Mystery Serum in Season 1, the deal that ultimately transformed Thaddeus into a ghoul. Back then, the Snake Oil Salesman was Fallout satire in human form, false hope, fake medicine, and survival-driven manipulation wrapped in charm.
This elixir I have concocted heals all.
His reappearance initially feels like a reward for longtime fans. A fun cameo, nothing more. But that assumption is exactly the trap, because Episode 5 isn't bringing him back for comedy. It's bringing him back to explain Hank. When we catch up with the Snake Oil Salesman, he's still drifting through the Wasteland with the same philosophy that's always kept him alive. Avoid roots, avoid responsibility, chase sensation. He's on his way to New Vegas, not for power or purpose, but for pleasure. That's how he ends up sharing a bizarrely sincere romantic moment with Fisto, one of the most infamous joke characters from Fallout New Vegas. On paper, this scene is pure absurdity. A sex robot programmed to fulfill desires, sharing an oddly tender encounter with a con man. But this moment matters more than it seems, because what that scene establishes isn't humor, it's psychology. The Snake Oil Salesman doesn't recoil from danger or absurdity. He doesn't resist it, he flows with it. In a world where most people cling desperately to identity, memory, or purpose, he survives by letting go of all three. And that trait makes him uniquely compatible with Hank's technology. Hank's entrance cuts the comedy short in the most unsettling way possible. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't posture. He simply appears calm, methodical, already in control. The Snake Oil Salesman barely has time to process what's happening before he's unconscious, dragged back to Hank's lab, and strapped into the same sterile nightmare we've seen before. By now, Fallout has trained us to expect a specific outcome in this room. We've seen Hank's device fail repeatedly. The implant at the base of the neck is designed to erase memory, suppress identity, and overwrite autonomy. Previous subjects, mostly Vault-Tec cryo-sleep survivors, reacted violently. Their minds resisted. Their skulls exploded. The device seemed flawed, unstable, unfinished. So when the Snake Oil Salesman wakes up restrained on the table, the tension is immediate. We expect blood. We expect failure. Instead, we get something far worse. When Hank explains the offer, complete erasure, freedom from memory, freedom from pain, the Snake Oil Salesman doesn't panic. He doesn't beg. He doesn't try to escape. He accepts eagerly. And when Hank activates the device, the camera pans away, but there's no explosion. No blood on the glass, no failure, no resistance. This isn't because Hank suddenly perfected the technology. This is because the Snake Oil Salesman didn't fight it. Here's the critical correction that reframes the entire episode. The device doesn't work on empty minds. It works on detached ones. Hank's earlier test subjects were anchored to memory. They knew who they were. They remembered the old world. They clung to identity, even as it was taken from them. Their resistance wasn't physical. It was psychological, and the device responded by tearing them apart. The Snake Oil Salesman, by contrast, doesn't define himself through memory. His identity is fluid, disposable, interchangeable. Trauma, drugs, radiation, and survival have already loosened his attachment to self. To him, forgetting isn't death, it's relief. That's why the device holds. This idea is reinforced earlier in the season when Hank leaves behind a mentally compromised Wastelander as a message for Lucy. That man wasn't dead. He wasn't fully erased either. He was functional, obedient, and hollowed out just enough to serve a purpose. The Snake Oil Salesman is simply the most successful version of that experiment so far. And crucially, Hank didn't bring him in just to test the device. He brought him in to use him. That becomes devastatingly clear when the episode shifts to the Atomic Wrangler, a location loaded with Fallout history and moral decay. This isn't just fan service, it's symbolic. The Atomic Wrangler is a place where bodies, desires, and agency have always been transactional. It's the perfect stage for Hank's real reveal. Through the Snake Oil Salesman, Hank delivers his message to Lucy and the Ghoul. And this is where episode 5 permanently fractures the season. Hank isn't improvising, he's executing a plan. The message is simple and merciless. Return Lucy, and Barb and Janie, frozen in cryosleep inside Hank's lair, will live. Refuse, and they die. Hank confirms he has plans, and Lucy is in the way. This moment redefines Hank completely. Up until now, Hank could still be read as a scientist blinded by ambition, a man who believes control is necessary to rebuild the world. But here, he strips away that ambiguity. Lucy isn't his daughter in this equation. She's a variable, a liability, something to be removed. And he doesn't deliver this message himself. He uses a man who no longer truly exists. The Snake Oil Salesman isn't pleading. He isn't mocking. He isn't performing. He's a vessel. Hank has created exactly what Vault-Tec always dreamed of. A human interface capable of executing commands without conscience, resistance, or emotional contamination. That's the real breakthrough. Not the device, not the technology. The realization that control doesn't require force, only compatibility. And Hank knows exactly who this message is really for. Because the threat isn't just aimed at Lucy. It's aimed at the Ghoul. By invoking Barb and Janie, Hank reaches directly into the Ghoul's unresolved past. He exposes the one thing the Ghoul still anchors his identity to: family, love, guilt. Hank doesn't need to threaten violence. He simply applies pressure to the one place the Ghoul never armored. The betrayal that follows doesn't come out of nowhere. It's engineered. When the Ghoul chooses to comply, it isn't because he's weak. It's because Hank understands him better than Lucy does, and better than the Ghoul understands himself. Hank doesn't see people as good or evil. He sees leverage. Lucy's reaction, punching the Ghoul through a window, isn't just anger, it's the collapse of certainty. It's the moment she realizes that trust is a luxury the Wasteland doesn't allow, and that even the strongest alliances rot under the right pressure. And all of it traces back to that quiet, horrifying moment in the lab. The Snake Oil Salesman didn't survive because Hank mastered his device. He survived because he was willing to surrender himself. That's the thesis of episode 5. Fallout isn't warning us about technology, it's warning us about what happens when survival forces people to detach from who they are. In a world that punishes memory and rewards adaptability, the most dangerous weapon isn't a bomb or a virus. It's a person who no longer needs to remember why they exist. The Snake Oil Salesman isn't a villain. He isn't a hero. He's proof that the Wasteland doesn't just destroy people, it reshapes them into tools. And Hank is simply the man who learned how to aim them. By the end of the Wrangler, nothing can go back to the way it was. Lucy can't unhear the message. The Ghoul can't undo his choice. And Hank has confirmed that he's no longer reacting to chaos, he's directing it. The episode never screams this at the audience. It hides it behind humor, nostalgia, and absurdity. But once you see it, the season changes shape. The Snake Oil Salesman didn't lose his head because he already let go of what was inside it. And that realization should scare you far more than any explosion ever could.